Hello guys and welcome back. So we're going straight back into Elizabeth and her religious policy. Now previously we've looked at the legacy and the inheritance Elizabeth received and how her family and those before her changed the church in England. We've looked at what she herself wanted out of the church and what her religious policy actually looked like. And now in today's video we're going to have a look at opposition to Elizabeth's church. Okay, so whilst Elizabeth had inherited the throne of England, which made her one of the most powerful people in Europe, her position on the throne and her life are always extremely vulnerable. She had to be wary of some very powerful players around her, as she could easily be removed or threatened from both within the country and outside the country. So she's at threat from both internal rebellions and plots who might aim to remove her or replace her, as well as external invasion from other foreign nations. So she's in a very extremely vulnerable position. Now, the Catholic faith at the time is extremely powerful, especially in Europe. And what you can see on my map here is that everywhere that's yellow is Roman Catholic, okay? So large swathes of Europe and some very powerful countries at the time, Spain, France, are Catholic and therefore can be a significant threat towards her. France at this time are actually having some civil wars over religion, so that's why we've got some splattering of green on France, because they're having civil war over whether to be Protestant or Catholic themselves. But Spain is very strongly Catholic, so is Italy with the Pope, and France really has some Catholic, well, it's kind of more dominantly Catholic still. Ireland as well, if you look, right next to England, Ireland is strongly Catholic, and Scotland, I'm going to talk about Scotland in a moment, but Scotland themselves were Catholic, but are now transitioning into being Protestant too. So all around England, they have some very, very strong countries who might threaten them, which is why it's very important that Elizabeth plays this kind of political game properly, or she might face some serious threat from foreign invasion. Okay, so remember, in the Catholic Church, the head of the church is the Pope, okay? And at this time, the Pope is a man called Pius V, and he's right here. So the Pope had sworn against Elizabeth's legitimacy because obviously he would not agree with the divorce of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII, and therefore he would not see the legitimacy in Henry's marriage to Anne, or therefore Elizabeth's birth. So he had stated that she wasn't legitimate. However, he also said he would consider her as the rightful Queen of England if she were to convert to Catholicism. So there's a little bit of time there for Elizabeth to consolidate her throne, so to make sure she was safe on the throne before she had to worry about the Pope and what he might do. Another person she needed to worry about was Philip. Now, Philip is Philip of Spain, and it's the widowed husband of her older sister Mary. Now, Philip is also the King of Spain in his own right, so he's very, very powerful at the time. Now, Spain is especially powerful at this point because Spain has kind of taken the initiative, I guess, or been the first country to really fully reap the reward and go out and do it in terms of colonizing in the New World. Now, by that, what I mean is exploring and setting down roots and setting down colonies in South America, Central America, and we get on to North America too. But for Spain, it was predominantly the South and Central America. Now, that means that Spain was benefiting from all of that income of money in terms of trading routes and raw materials that they were kind of plundering from these countries. And therefore, Spain is extremely wealthy and powerful ahead of other European nations. Now, Philip is a devout Catholic and had interest in England. We know that because he married Mary. So he would either want to bring Elizabeth onto his side, or he'd want to oppose her. And her religion is probably going to be quite a big deciding factor in which way he chooses to go. Now, it's really important that we completely understand the threat here, because the Pope could do something called excommunicate Elizabeth. And if he excommunicated her, as he did Henry VIII after he changed the religion in England, that would mean that any good Catholic if they were following the Pope, had a right, had a justification to get rid of Elizabeth. And with his excommunication, which does come in 1570, it means that all of the Catholic nations of Europe, particularly Spain, who has the money to do something about it, would at that point start to consider how they might get rid of Elizabeth. They've been given a justification to do so, okay? So that's really, really important to know. That is how grave and how big the threat from external countries, external factors are. Now, I said I'd mention quickly about Scotland, and Scotland has recently had what we call a religious coup. Now, a coup is where you replace the monarch, or you replace the powerful individual or family of the time. And what Scotland has done is they've got rid of their queen. They've kind of Mary Queen of Scots, I'm going to talk about in a later video in more detail, and they have taken the power away from the monarch. Now, the group that did this, we call them the Protestant Lords of Congregation. So they are Protestants. This means actually that it could work in Elizabeth's favour, as it meant England had a close Protestant ally really close to home. Now, Elizabeth would need to be very, very careful politically and diplomatically to ensure these powerful individuals are kept on her side. We're going to look at a moment at what kind of policy Elizabeth, well, we know what kind of policy Elizabeth chooses, but we're going to see about how this helps her consolidate power, and then what other people might actually draw on these external powers to help them try to remove Elizabeth. Okay, so the first thing that Elizabeth would need to do is to ensure that she consolidated her power, that she had a smooth transition into being Queen of England, and that she was accepted by the people. We could easily try to, well, people could have easily tried to prevent this from happening, put somebody else on the throne. So this was really, really key to her legitimacy and her right to rule and all those things. It was very, very key to prove all of that in order to have a smooth transition and a celebrated coronation and be accepted as the Queen of England. Now, she used her religious settlement as one method of consolidating her right to rule. As we already discussed, her legitimacy is questioned, as her father has accused her mother of adultery for cheating on him, and declared Elizabeth a bastard himself. So this would have meant that she could not have inherited the throne. You have to be legitimate in order to take the throne from your father or your brother or whoever you're inheriting the throne from. Furthermore, in Catholicism, her mother's marriage to her father is illegal. So therefore, all of the Catholics in England, or people who really strongly believed in kind of Catholicism and wanted a reason to oppose Elizabeth, would not have seen her as the rightful queen and heir. This meant establishing a clear and fair religious policy is really, really important to win support, and arguably partly why she chooses to have such a compromise as her policy to try and bring those Catholics back on side. Okay, now to make the situation even more dangerous, we've got another person that kind of enters the stage. Now, that is Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, Mary is Elizabeth's cousin, and she is the next in line to the English throne by blood. She is she's the granddaughter of Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII's sister. So she's got a very, very strong claim on the English throne. She is the Queen of Scotland. However, she returns from France after her French husband dies. She was married to the Dauphin of France, so the heir to the French throne. He dies quite early, and so she returns to Scotland to take over and be Queen of Scotland. She then faces the coup I previously mentioned, and the Scottish Lords of Congregation effectively, after a while, take the throne away from her. So we have a dangerous situation. We've got Mary, who is looking for support effectively to help her maybe win back her throne, but potentially she might want to take the throne of England instead. She's a far better choice for many Catholics than Elizabeth is, and all they would have to do to put Mary on the throne is get rid of Elizabeth. Now, this leads to many assassination attempts against Elizabeth's life. Now, there are three main serious threats to Elizabeth's life, and the first one is called the Ridolfi Plot. Now, in 1571, there was the Rodolfi Plot. This was a conspiracy for Mary, Queen of Scots, to marry the Duke of Norfolk and overthrow Elizabeth. There was a plan for Philip of Spain to invade England and support the Catholic uprising. This shows just how dangerous it was for foreign powers like the Pope and Spain to be against Elizabeth. The results. So in reality, what happened was Walsingham, Francis Walsingham, who I've mentioned to you before, Elizabeth's spy master, was so skilled at uncovering the plots, no harm is done. Norfolk was executed, and Mary, Queen of Scots, is placed under guard and house arrest. Okay, so the second plot against Elizabeth's life happened in 1583, and this was the Throckmorton Plot. Now, this again wanted to bring about a Catholic invasion of England, this time supported by both France and Spain, showing how dangerous it was to have all of those powerful countries in Europe be Catholic because they could unite against Elizabeth. In reality, the result of this, it was again foiled by Walsingham's spy network and did not result in any kind of substantial impact or threat against Elizabeth's life. Okay, and lastly, we have the Babington Plot. Now, this happened in 1586, and it was by far the most dangerous plot. Mary, Queen of Scots, was found to have been directly involved in this herself. 6 men were going to try and assassinate the Queen and replace her with Mary. Now, the results, yet again, Walsingham found evidence of the plot before it had time to materialize. He found letters Mary had been smuggling in beer kegs, okay, so big vats of beer. Mary had been putting letters inside, and Walsingham found them. This led to Elizabeth signing Mary's death warrant and finally the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the biggest Catholic threat to Elizabeth throughout her reign. Okay, so now while there were multiple plots against Elizabeth, all of them failed to win any real support. This shows that while there were still lots of Catholics in England, many of them felt loyalty towards Elizabeth despite their faith and her faith. Even when Philip of Spain invaded England in 1588, no English Catholics came out in support of him. This shows that Elizabeth's religious policy was relatively successful and achieved what she wanted in terms of bringing peace and tolerance to England.